Before you touched your phone this morning, your brain made a decision about how the rest of your day would feel. Not consciously, but biologically. In the first moments after waking, your mind is unusually open, highly sensitive, almost unfinished. Most people unknowingly hand this moment to stress, noise, and urgency. And then they wonder why the day feels heavy before it even begins. What if I told you that the difference between a restless mind and a steady one often comes down to just 10 minutes, so small they feel insignificant, yet powerful enough to quietly reprogram how your brain handles stress, focus, and emotion for the next 16 hours. When the brain wakes in the morning, it does not simply switch on, it transitions through a delicate neurobiological recalibration. During this window, the nervous system shifts from the slower rhythms of sleep into alertness, guided largely by hormonal and electrical changes. Cortisol, often misunderstood as a stress hormone, rises naturally at this time to provide energy, clarity, and readiness. This rise is not harmful on its own, it becomes problematic only when the brain interprets the environment as threatening or chaotic. The first few minutes after waking strongly influence that interpretation. If the morning begins with rushing, loud stimulation, or immediate exposure to demands, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes overactive. This teaches the nervous system that the day is unsafe before it has even begun. Over time, this pattern leads to a chronically elevated stress baseline, where the mind feels tense even in neutral situations. However, when the brain is given a brief period of calm and predictability, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. This signals safety, allowing emotional regulation centers to come online smoothly. Neuroplasticity is heightened in these early moments. Neural pathways responsible for mood, attention, and impulse control are more receptive to conditioning. A simple practice such as slow breathing, gentle movement, or quiet awareness can stabilize heart rate variability and reduce inflammatory stress responses. These changes may feel subtle, but they accumulate. The brain begins to expect calm instead of chaos, control instead of urgency. This is what a true neurobiological reset looks like, not forcing positivity or suppressing stress, but guiding the nervous system into balance at the moment it is most teachable. Just 10 minutes can recalibrate the internal environment of the brain, setting a foundation for clarity, emotional steadiness, and resilience that lasts throughout the day. Attention is one of the most misunderstood psychological functions. Many people believe they either have focus or they do not, as if attention were a fixed trait. In reality, attention is a conditioned neurological process, shaped daily by how the brain is allowed to orient itself when it first wakes. In the early morning, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and sustained focus, is still stabilizing. During this period, attention is highly malleable. If the mind is immediately pulled into multiple stimuli, notifications, news, unresolved thoughts, the brain learns to scan, switch, and react. This trains fragmented attention. Over time, this conditioning reduces the brain's ability to stay with a single task and increases mental fatigue. The brain becomes efficient at distraction rather than depth. Importantly, this is not a failure of willpower. It is a learned attentional pattern reinforced each morning. When attention is gently guided instead of hijacked, a different pattern emerges. Spending even a short period directing awareness toward one simple anchor, such as breathing, posture, or a single intentional thought, activates the brain's executive networks. The prefrontal cortex gains early control before emotional and habitual circuits dominate. This creates a psychological posture of agency rather than reactivity. Repeated daily, this practice strengthens attentional endurance. The brain becomes more comfortable with stillness and less dependent on novelty for stimulation. Concentration improves not because the day is quieter, but because the mind has been trained to choose where it rests. Over time, this conditioning reduces impulsive behavior, improves memory consolidation, and enhances problem-solving capacity. Attention conditioning in the morning is not about forcing focus, it is about teaching the brain that attention can be directed, not demanded. Those first minutes quietly determine whether the mind will spend the day scattered or steady, chasing stimuli or shaping experience from within. Emotional regulation is not something the mind switches on in moments of pressure, it is a capacity built long before stress appears. The brain learns how to handle emotion through repeated exposure to internal states, especially during predictable daily transitions. Morning is one of the most influential of these transitions. As the brain moves from rest into activity, emotional circuits are highly sensitive to cues of safety or threat. What the nervous system experiences in these early moments becomes the reference point for the rest of the day. When mornings are rushed or mentally chaotic, the amygdala remains on high alert. This does not necessarily produce obvious anxiety, but it lowers the threshold for emotional reactions. Small frustrations feel larger, patience wears thin, and recovery from stress takes longer. Over time, this pattern weakens emotional regulation, making the nervous system reactive rather than responsive. Brief, intentional morning practices create what can be described as stress immunity. By activating the parasympathetic nervous system early, through slow breathing, quiet awareness, or controlled movement, the brain is taught that arousal can rise without becoming overwhelming. This strengthens communication between the prefrontal cortex and emotional centers, allowing thoughts to modulate feelings instead of being controlled by them. Importantly, this process does not eliminate stress. It changes the brain's relationship with it. Stress signals are processed more accurately, without unnecessary amplification. Emotional recovery becomes faster, and baseline mood becomes more stable. Over weeks and months, this leads to fewer emotional spikes, improved frustration tolerance, and a greater sense of inner steadiness. Stress immunity is not built by avoiding difficulty, but by training the nervous system to return to balance efficiently. Just 10 minutes each morning provides a consistent, low-effort opportunity to rehearse emotional regulation. The brain learns that calm is accessible, even in the presence of challenge, and that lesson quietly reshapes mental health over time. The human brain is constantly forming conclusions about identity, not through reflection, but through behavior. It asks a simple question repeatedly: what kind of person does this action belong to? The answer is never abstract. It is written into the nervous system through patterns, especially those that occur daily and without external pressure. Morning micro-rituals are uniquely powerful because they happen before the world imposes expectations, roles, or demands. When a person consistently engages in a small, intentional act each morning, no matter how brief, the brain registers reliability. This creates a subtle but important shift in self-perception. Instead of seeing oneself as reactive, overwhelmed, or dependent on circumstances, the mind begins to internalize a different narrative: I am someone who shows up for my mental state. This identity is not declared, it is experienced. Micro-rituals work because they bypass resistance. Large goals often trigger fear, self-doubt, or avoidance, but small actions feel safe. The brain does not argue with 10 minutes. Yet repetition gives these actions disproportionate influence. Each time the ritual is completed, neural pathways associated with self-trust and agency are reinforced. Over time, this reduces internal conflict and increases psychological coherence. This identity reinforcement has long-term implications. When stress arises later in the day, the brain draws on the morning's evidence of control and self-care. Decisions become more aligned with long-term well-being rather than immediate relief. Motivation becomes quieter but more stable. Mental health is not only about symptom reduction, it is about identity alignment. Micro-rituals create that alignment gradually and sustainably. By honoring the mind with a small daily practice, the brain learns who it is, and once identity shifts, change no longer feels forced. Mental strength is not built in moments of crisis. It is built in the quiet decisions no one sees, especially the first one you make each morning. The brain does not need dramatic change to heal or grow, it needs clear, repeated signals of safety, direction, and self-respect. 10 minutes may feel insignificant, but to your nervous system, it is a powerful declaration that your inner state matters more than external noise. When you give your mind those few minutes each morning, you are not chasing calm, you are teaching your brain how to return to it. You are shaping attention before it is scattered, regulating emotion before it is tested, and reinforcing an identity that is grounded rather than reactive. Over time, this changes how stress is processed, how decisions are made, and how life is experienced. If there is one habit worth protecting, it is this. Not because it guarantees perfect days, but because it creates resilient ones. 10 minutes is enough to reset your biology, train your focus, and remind your mind that it does not belong to urgency. It belongs to you.